Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Suzette Speaks Show. I am Suzette Speaks. I am happy that you have found me here on YouTube. Please go ahead and like, comment, share. I have a quick announcement. My special guest, Mr. Anthony Gonzalez, will be joining us momentarily. He is finishing up with a patient. I'm going back and forth with him on text, but I need you to please let me know you're watching. We got a lot to talk about, fam. This is the Kodak Black episode. If you guys have not seen the flyer, either on Facebook and on LinkedIn or on Twitter, the flyer was very specific as to our topic today because I saw several things about Kodak Black in the news, and I wanted to get you up to speed with some really expert advice, someone who knows and has practiced. And I really wanted to share, my thoughts, his thoughts on where we can go from here. I see you watching. Please go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know that you're here, squad. Again, we have a special guest coming right up. He is finishing up a session with a patient. This is how busy he is, and I'm so grateful that he has made time for us today. And I am sending him over a quick link so that he can get on. But yeah, let us know that you're watching. This is a very interesting topic, and I want to make sure everybody who can be a part of it is a part of it. You guys, please go ahead and like, comment, and share. So, for those of you who are not aware of what Kodak Black said, who Kodak Black is, all of this, I had to make sure. Hey, just drop a comment. Let me know you're watching. I had to make sure. I didn't assume everybody kind of knew who he was. Of course, being from South Florida, he is an entertainer. He is I guess we'll call it a musician. Some people would say rapper. But he has been in and out of the news as of late, and he is going to, be the subject of our conversation. For one reason, and one reason alone, I really picked him as a subject matter, and that's because he sent out a series of tweets that were really disturbing not too long ago, and it brought attention to, I think, a crisis, a silent crisis that's going on in our community, and that is that of mental health and that of people who are dealing with depression and suicidal ideation, and in some ways are very highly sensitive to what's been going on in our community, and we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to express it fully, and oftentimes they suffer in silence. So I'm going to warn you, we are going to be talking about people trying to hurt themselves, going through depression, dealing with hurt. And oftentimes, like I said, this subject matter doesn't come up enough for us to be able to deal with it. So we're going to try our best. We're going to get some expert advice. We're going to let you in on the conversation. So if you have had any challenges with mental health, if you know people who are struggling with mental health, or if you have had these type of ideas in your mind where you thought about hurting yourself and you never thought you would be a person that had this type of experience, it's okay. We're going to talk about it today. So again, Suzette Speaks here. Welcome to the show. And I'm going to bring on our special guest just now, like I say, fresh out of a session. I know he's a busy guy, and we are going to just start a conversation, y'all. This is very informal, even though, we get dressed up and whatnot. The most important thing is that you guys get, something of value, something that sheds a little light on a subject matter that we don't get to explore often enough. So without further ado, I see you in the building. Drop a comment, y'all. Let me know. Let me know you're watching. I see you, Mars Mitch. Thank you for joining. Anyone else who wants to drop a comment, share a story, and I might even drop the link if you want to come up and share your personal story with us. I want this to be a community forum. I don't want it to just be us two, but if you are so inclined and you want to come on up and be a panelist, let me know. All right. So without further ado, this gentleman was on before. He introduced himself to you about a week or so ago, and I am very grateful to have him back. We are going to be in the presence of a mental and emotional health expert. He's a licensed clinical social worker. He has his own practice here in South Florida called, I wonder if I'm saying it right, I say ALERE, emotional health. I hope that's the way to say it. He's going to correct me if I'm wrong. And he's also the co-founder of a brand, a clothing line that brings mental health awareness to fashion. And I'm excited for him to talk all about that. But without further ado, let me bring him up on this stream. What's up? Y'all give a warm Suzette Speaks show welcome to Mr. Anthony, a.k.a. Tony Gonzalez. What up, what up, what up, what up? How are you?
Hey, Suzette, it's so good to be with you.
I'm
Wow.
so happy you're here. We got people watching. I'm so grateful. Hey, Chi-Town, what's going on? We are speaking mental health. This is your wheelhouse. I'm going to put my 2 cents in. That's what I do. But again, for those of you who are just joining, we've had some hot topics in the news, and the topic for today will concern Mr. Kodak Black. If you do not know who he is, go ahead and do a quick Google search. But I figure he was popular enough that most people might have heard of him. And we're going to get into what he tweeted about and why it really kind of disturbed his friends and family, and what it's emblematic of in terms of what people go through. And sometimes, hey, they saying welcome back. Yes, glad to have him back. All right, so before we get into the subject, go ahead and introduce yourself for the people. Glad to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me on. My name is Anthony Gonzalez. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but I do, for most people who are close to me, they know me as Tony. I do have a practice. You did pronounce it correctly. It is ALERE Emotional Health. And actually, just a little, what ALERE stands for, what it means is it's based in Latin that loosely translated to nurture, to feed, or to help cause growth. And that really is what, my practice, the people that I work closely with, we really try to focus on is not, in our practice, our therapy is not necessarily to fix anyone. It's to nurture in the best way we can and to help, water the seeds they already have and to help them grow in the way that they feel is most important and to achieve their goals, whatever they are. Originally from Kansas City, Kansas, went to the University of Kansas, got my bachelor's degree in human development and my master's degree in 2005 in clinical social welfare, and have been in Florida. I've been a resident of Florida since 2009, and have had my practice since early or mid-spring of last year. And it was kind of a serendipitous time because it was when, the pandemic was raving, and, people were only becoming more and more aware of the needs they have. Because, I'm sure we're going to dig into this today, that for so long, we get so busy with our lives and raising our kids and our work and all this stuff. And particularly in our communities, we're just taught to keep it pushing, and not attend to those things. And I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic that I saw most was like, people like, oh man, I need help. Like this is weighing on me. And so it's one of those things that, when I hung my shingle, that it was like, it was the right time for people that really needed the additional help. So I was grateful to be available, and still am, to be available for so many people that are really seeking for that support that they need.
That's fantastic. Like I said, we hate to need you, but we're glad you're there. And we're glad
Right.
so
What?
many, I think there's been a bit of a renaissance when it comes to talking about mental health, and people are discovering more and more how important mental health is. Like we have had this whole wave of, physical health, nutrition, and eat right. And that was like good 20 years, 30 years, maybe Reagan time and more, maybe a little bit beyond me, but we've been talking about, heart health and getting out and exercising. And then all of a sudden, I would say, I don't know, it has become more in vogue to talk about the mental health aspects, especially now. I think it's especially probably more in the last 5 years, but maybe even longer than that, 10 or so years, there has become an acceptance or a little bit more of an awareness that people's minds and your mind being in balance has a great deal to do with the physical and every other aspect of your life. And it's become more okay, I guess, to talk about it. A lot of times people was hiding how they felt back in the day. Y'all comment, let me know if I'm wrong, but it's become a little bit more accepted. I think there is a lot of taboo. Let me not say that all of the stigma has been cleared, but
Right.
we're at least having more conversations about how we can keep ourselves as healthy as possible, not only externally, but internally. So when we were discussing what topic we were going to come in and talk about today, we was like, Kodak, right? And I know that jumped out at you, right? You were like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
Kodak. Were you surprised at my choice?
I was a little, but I think it's a bridge to help see very much nowadays, like how it manifests.
Absolutely.
Because when like so much, I think, to speak to the stigmas you were talking about a second ago, was like it was this very dichotomous perspective on mental illness. Like either there's people that have these things that are mentally ill, and then everybody else doesn't, and we're okay. And
Mm-mm.
I think, and that's why I think in many ways where this stigma was born, it's like it's either or, either you're okay or you're not. And I think we're starting to see that even people we admire, we look up to, that we relate to, that we know, we see, which then brings us into our own families and our communities, that mental health is a spectrum that we move on constantly in and out of our lives. And it's, I don't know him. I'm a fan of his music, and I know he's a young man that's local, and so I want to speak today about, just from a perspective, I don't know him and I don't know what he's going through.
Right. We're not trying to diagnose
But
Kodak on your
I'm
show.
not
Yeah.
trying to diagnose him in any way, but I also know that the struggles that people face on a day-to-day basis, and kind of what he was talking about. And I think it's indicative of the fact that he was able to be open, and the fact that he was able to essentially assert himself and like, this is where I'm at, y'all. This world, this is where I'm at. And hopefully, the team around him, the people that love him and care for him are helping him get support. I think it hopefully it's a bit of a guide for some of us who have been struggling in silence or not recognizing that this is part of what I'm dealing with. But man, I feel that same way, that maybe it gives them a little more permission to say, hey, I need some help too, or this is what I'm going through. And so it's just,
Yeah.
I'm
It's a
grateful that
very,
seeing
yeah.
more young men particularly saying that
Absolutely.
this is where
Speaking to
I'm
the
at.
brothers, the
Yeah.
sisters need it, the brothers need it. Like you said, it's a lifetime. It's a, like you call it a spectrum. I call it seasons. So
Mm-hmm.
even in
Yeah.
seasons, you have to just check yourself. You have good seasons where you're like feeling all together, and then you may have a low season, and that's completely natural. That's how life works. I think people expect to be happy all the time. It doesn't work that way, guys. We have, seasons. So sometimes we have to, pay more attention to our mental health than other times, and that's completely natural. But yeah, so Kodak, what did he say? Let me get some folks here. Please drop a comment. Let us know you're watching. This is Suzette Speaks. Again, please hit that subscribe button so we can come up in the algorithm. You know how we're doing. We're building a community here. So we're going to talk mental health today. So there were two tweets, and I'm just going to read them to allow our viewers to know what we're talking about. Kodak, of course, being so famous was the other aspect of it that really spoke to me, because I'm like, this man has all the money that he could probably wish for. All these, the circle of friends, if we want to call that. I don't know if everybody's a friend, but I just think,
Right.
his crew, I guess we can call it. He wrote this, and it hurt me. I was like, golly, somebody check on Kodak. But it said, so lonely, depressed, sad, and effed up. Nobody love me. Nobody cares. I'm everywhere at once. Friends playing in my head. Girls playing with my heart. Wish I could go back to the start. I'll never be famous. And then later on, he tweeted, sitting in my room crying, feel like taking myself.
Yeah.
So when I saw those tweets and there was some conversation about it, and I just didn't want it to fly as like a news headline, it's serious, guys, because
Mm-hmm.
for someone to be so talented, for someone to be so talented and so ringtone of old school jams, someone to be so, well loved, to not feel that anyone loves him, and so deeply felt it, so much that he tweeted it. Like, he didn't write it in his diary, he didn't send a text, put it on Twitter
Put
where
it
he
out
has,
for the world.
thousands of
Yeah.
people. Exactly. So when you hear things like this, what does it remind you of, or can you give us an idea of what you see in your practice that kind of will shed some light on this type of scenario?
So a few things. It's a great question. It's depression. I mean, that's when depression hits us in many different ways. And again, I'm not diagnosing him, but this, thoughts of hurting oneself, thoughts of taking one's own life, these intrusive thoughts that can be so dark are often manifest out of, struggles with depression and our mood being so low, and a sense of helplessness and hopelessness around how it can change. And I think the pressures of life, to the piece at the very end, I would go back and not be famous. um, I think there's a struggle, and I'm not famous, so I don't know what it's like, but I could imagine that constant bubble you're in, of everyone watching every step and every mistake and every misspoken word, and being criticized, or potentially, picked apart, and that weighs on somebody. And in our own lives, that's, I think that manifestation of depressed mood and sense of uncertainty and hopelessness, that people look for ways out. And if, while I would never ever condone and taking one's own life, but I can also understand from the people that I see and I work with on a day-to-day basis that sometimes people just don't want to be in pain anymore. Sometimes people want to find a sense of relief, and if they can't find that or don't see a route out of it, somehow that starts to make sense to them. Um, Even though there's always a way out, that the idea of taking one's own life is a permanent solution for most times temporary problems or temporary pains or temporary stresses. And I think that becomes the key, is that we can feel this impulsive, I just want a way out. I don't want to feel this weight of sadness anymore, or this emotional pain anymore, and not necessarily know how to ask for help or how to ask for support. I also think, about young men and young women, and too. I think it's, across the spectrum, that just coming from the places that we come from, we have this struggle with being vulnerable, and in our communities, it's historically has been looked at as a sign of weakness to say that I need help or that this is what I'm struggling with. And I think it's when we're able to get to the point to say, this is where I'm at. I'm this low. I'm struggling so much with this, that that is something we need to really reinforce and emphasize, because that's what's going to ultimately break the stigma long term, is to say, no matter what stage of life you're at, no matter how much success or not you have, that it's okay. It's okay to struggle. It's okay, because we all do at times in our lives. The other part I'll say, just to what he tweeted, was this sense of abandonment. Like feeling so alone in the world. I think that, I know my experience and with the people that I've worked with over the years, is that sense of emotional isolation is often the tipping point for people, that I don't feel connected to anybody. I could be in a room of people and I don't feel anyone understands me. I could be in a room of people and no one's making an attempt to really hear or pay attention to or validate what I'm going through. Or nobody's really even seems curious about what I'm going through. And that sense of emotional isolation is the path that often leads to that sense of desperation, that I just don't want to be alive anymore. And I think we need to take these things serious. The last point I would say on this is when people say it, we cannot judge that they're just wanting attention. We cannot judge that they're just, crying out for help, or they're just doing this for some other reason. We have to really pay attention when somebody says it, because I personally don't ever want to live with the guilt of, yeah, somebody told me that and I didn't do anything about it, or I didn't listen, or I didn't actually give it my full attention. And so, again, I hope the people that are around him are actually taking this very seriously. And I think if anyone that's watching, anyone that's listening, or they will watch it in the future, that if you have someone you love that has said this to you, or made any implication or any assertion that this is what they're dealing with, take it very seriously. Have the conversation. We often shy away from these difficult conversations because we're afraid, oh, if I bring it up and they're not thinking it, then I might plant a seed. That's a myth. That never happens. Research has shown that, like, bringing it up and having these difficult conversations is the way out of it for most people, is to share that burden with someone else, and to find out that maybe somebody actually does care, that what my mind was telling me, what that depression was telling me, what those intrusive trauma thoughts were telling me is not true, that there are people in the world who care about me and are actually very concerned and are actually invested in me getting some sort of help that I need.
I hear you loud and clear, my brother. I have a couple comments, greetings. I'm just going to give a quick reset here. Suzette Speaks here.
What's up,
This is the
Jackie?
Suzette Speaks show. I want you guys to please drop comments. Hey, Jackie, thank you for joining. I see a comment here, Tony, and I'm going to ask you to comment on it. It says, blind guy, his wife, their life. Thank you. Says, it's even harder for men to ask for help. They have to source the help first, and sources are more abundant for women. I think that is a very true statement. I think especially depending on what age group man, where his background is, and I think there's a lot to be said about men's expectations in society and what they are told and how they are told they need to feel and all of that. Can you address
Right.
this? What do you think? Are men finding it more difficult than women to find resources?
Yes, absolutely. I remember I was actually, when I was in graduate school from 2002 to 2005, I went through basically 8 semesters when you include the 2 summer courses. And there was one class that I had there was one other male. And, I love all my colleagues, and the place that I was a clinical director of for 8 years, 7 years, that I was the only male there for many years. I was in the doctor. Um, it's I think part of it is our, just the lower numbers of men in the industry that are therapists, particularly men of color.
Mm,
Um, and I think for men, it's we become, and I'm going to say this with caution, but I think there is a truth to this. We think only men can help us. We keep this ego up
mm.
that, well, I need to only talk to another man because only another man can help me. I
Or maybe
call
I feel
BS on
safer
it.
with another
Or
man.
I
Yeah.
feel safer with him. Again, I don't think that's wrong, but I think if the point is, I think if we're struggling, is to get help. And if the filter becomes, I don't think there's not enough men, or I can't find one, then there's plenty of women, female, identify cross spectrum, that non-male, that are incredible clinicians that can help and can understand. And I think that we have often a struggle with being vulnerable in front of women,
Period.
and
Mm,
period.
mm.
And because of historical, we have to, is what we're told, or that you know could really get deep into this, are struggles with masculinity and femininity and these intersections. And so I think is to be conscious of, if I have that barrier in place because
Mhm.
I don't can't necessarily find a man, what's stopping me from finding a female therapist that I could connect with, or at least make the effort to.
Yeah,
My
I
hope
think
is
that's a very
that over time
good
there's
point, and
more
I
of a
agree
balance
with
in the
them.
field. But
It's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable, especially with a woman. And again, I never really think of it like that. Because I've had people even tell me, and Tony, I'm going to ask you, your headpiece is giving me a little bit of feedback. Can you do it without your headpiece, or is it a space where it's in a lot of noise? I'm getting
no,
a
I can
little
do it
bit of
without.
feedback because I want your voice to be clear, crisp, and clear.
Yep,
And it
I can
was
do that.
without it. But yeah, I was talking to people who know, you guys know that I do, and go ahead and turn on your volume. I will, yeah, go ahead. So, one thing about me, you guys know that I do women's empowerment events, and one thing I'm always being told by guys is that, Suzette, you should do some for the men, and
Mm.
I'm always saying the men ain't gonna come. I have a heart for women, and I think I'm being called to help women, but I never really thought of myself as being, able to reach men, or that men would be like really responsive in the same way that women are. And I think there are some very, interesting sociological and psychological and societal reasons why
Mhm.
women would be comfortable with women, and women are taught to be okay with emotions and lean into their emotions and are better communicators, or they communicate differently, I should say, and all
Mhm.
those other things. So it's easier for me to draw in women and to help them. So I don't know, would you guys think that if there were forums like women's empowerment, movement type forums, workshops, etc., would men come? I think about that, like men's conferences and stuff. I see men go when their significant others pull them. So I don't know. I don't know. Let me hear your voice, Tony. Let me hear how you sound.
Can you hear me now? Is that a little better?
Okay, I like that. Again, it wasn't major feedback.
Yeah.
It was just a little bit of I don't know what that's called. It was hot, if you would. It sounds like you were very close to a mic. So
Okay.
I'm glad. We're good. We're good. I like this comment. Thank you. Gian Petit says, "What about men who choose risky activities to try to feel better?" Oh, this is so real. Can you talk about that? I heard one person say it like this, like you killing yourself, but you never shot a bullet. Like those type of activities that can be, camouflaging pain, but
Yeah.
never address it. Speak on that for me, my brother.
It's this idea of toughness, right? That I'm gonna go a straight clinical route on this. This is trauma that we are taught that when we have these emotions, that because we're not allowed to express sadness or vulnerability, we mask it as anger and aggression because that comes easier for many years. That's the models we were shown. And so it's not that we don't feel it, but there's this kind of reaction inside of us that if I show this, if I'm open about this, I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be pushed back on, I'll be looked down upon. And so I think to the person who's asking, Jean, is saying people who choose these risky behaviors, they're masks because they are short-term gratifications for people. There's a dopamine rush and adrenaline rush that makes us feel better in the moment, in a sense. But when we come down from that rush, we're still sitting with the same struggle, the same sadness, the same guilt, the same regret, or what, same memory, the same, intrusive thought, whatever it is that led us to that. And until we actually deal with what that is, I loved your last episode. I'm going to say this real quick because I think there's a bridge here of understanding and looking more deeply into generational traumas. How did I come to believe what I believe about myself? How did I come to believe what I believe about what it means to be a man or a woman or a husband or a wife or a partner or a mother or father, whatever that is? Because if I don't understand the etiology, the roots of where I'm coming from, then I'm going to persist in the patterns. And I think that to that question, the risk-taking behavior is really just a short-term fix. And it's a mask that we will wear to feel better, like the question is, and ultimately it's a short-term remedy. And so I think what we can encourage each other to do is dig deeper, is to say I'm gonna take this veil off and allow myself to expose that vulnerable side in a safe way. And I think whether that's in a therapy office, um, I'm I believe in therapy. But also believe it could be with a pastor, it could be with a priest, it could be with a rabbi, it could be with the imam, it could be with a really close friend who's understanding and trustworthy and is not going to judge us, because that's ultimately what we're looking for when we let that guard down and be vulnerable, is for someone to accept us as we are, to not judge us, and try to hear us fully. Because ultimately that's what therapy is a safe place to open up and hopefully not necessarily give answers. I don't actually give advice to people in sessions. Most of the time it's us working together to try to find answers. I don't have all the answers. Shit, I barely have the answers in my own life.
Hello.
But I think that risk-taking behavior that she was asking about is a way to not let our guard down.
And I think and for him, I don't mean to cut you off, because I was just thinking about him and other people in his industry, not just him. And I don't know about his, substance use. And I think a lot of times for me, when I see young men, particularly Black men, smoking cannabis, to me, it's self-medicating and not necessarily drug abuse in a sense. Do you get what I'm saying? It's more like I want to dull that, you say, trauma, past emotion, past experience, feeling of hopelessness, feeling of like, not mattering to anybody. No one sees me. No one hears me. No one loves me. And I think a lot of people in the hood and thereabouts, in the burbs too, are self-medicating and are thought of as, oh my gosh, they smoke weed all the time. But it's not about that. It's more so about them coping with whatever they're dealing with. I think that's a very good observation. Thank you, Gian.
Can I speak to that just for a second?
Sure, absolutely.
There's actually was a study, a longitudinal study done called the ACEs survey, which stood for Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey. And ultimately, one of the things, I won't go into all the details, but one of the things they actually found was that somewhere between 70 and 80% of adults that struggle with addiction have had childhood trauma, unresolved childhood trauma. Now that could be from something along the lines of like sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental, emotional abuse, what we call traumatic invalidation, which means that neglect, abandonment, just not being made to feel important enough. And so to your point, which is so well made about self-medication, is that if I don't know what to do with all these feelings, I don't know what to do with these intrusive thoughts, I don't know what to do with these beliefs that I've come to accept about myself because I was either told, or, which is sometimes the case that we overlook, is because what we weren't told, and we just created the story for ourselves, and we believed it for so long that it's become true, that we look for a way out. We look for, again, back to this idea of looking for some sort of relief.
Absolutely.
The frustration I have, as I mean, I can understand the dialectic, is substances work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not advocating that, but the truth is, if I don't want to feel,
yeah. Well, that's how people get on them.
Right, they work. And so the
Mm-hmm.
goal is to get hopefully to help people get to a place where they can acknowledge what's actually hurting, so they don't need to numb anymore.
I appreciate that. We got some comments coming in. Thank y'all for watching. Let me do a quick reset. I am Suzette Speaks. This is my show. Hey, welcome y'all. I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Tony Gonzalez. We're talking about Kodak Black and some tweets he made recently that made many people question his mental health and brought to light that there are so many men, and particularly Black men, are suffering in silence, and many of us across the board. I want to hear from you. So here we go. Blind guy, his wife says, you have the plug now, Suzette. Bring Tony on and the men will go. You know what? You might be onto something for real. Because I don't know. I always feel ill-equipped. And I feel like men should minister to men. I feel that. So, but as you said, women can also help when there is a lack of male presence or the numbers just don't add up. And I don't know if I would be afraid to, but I'm always very careful about the spirit of men. They're very sensitive. Men are very sensitive, in my opinion. You can back me up, Tony. Let me know.
Yeah.
But I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to, say anything that would, break their spirit further. But I just think that I see a comfort when I see men helping men. What say you?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I think it's the ability for, I think ultimately it's down to, but we're talking about connection here.
Yeah.
How do we connect with one another? And if there are ways that we can, that are bridges, the access points, whether it's shared cultural background, shared age, shared, gender, shared sexuality, whatever these social positioning components of how we relate and how we kind of connect with one another, then we're more likely to feel comfortable enough, again, not to be repetitive, but to let our guard down and show a little more of that authentic vulnerability of what's really happening inside us. What is it that we don't want to share the world? And I think for some level that's okay. You don't want to share the world to everybody, but until it starts to weigh on us, until we said, I can't bear this alone. And I think, and that's part of my interpretation of what Kodak is going through, is like, I can't imagine what it's like to, again, and not to be repetitive, but to fame, money, cars, everything we want, pressure of that, to maintain it, to have to feel like I have to take care of, because I'm the one that made it out. I have to now go back and take care. But then when I go back and take care of everybody, I might be a target now. And that this constant push and pull of how do I navigate these things, and not knowing who to trust, not knowing who has my best interest, not knowing who I can actually speak this vulnerability to. So I'll just tell the whole world, and hopefully the ones that actually care will
show up for me. Yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
That's real. I don't know. Have y'all ever been to a point where you just tell all your business? You know when you about to have a breakdown. Yeah. When whoever's sitting in front of you, you're like, I'm gonna tell every single thing, every corner of my life. You ever had some of these deep conversations with strangers? Am I the only one that a random person at Walmart would just tell me their whole life, and I'm like, Lord, maybe it's good because it allows them to like release that pressure. There's nobody in their life that they feel like they can, trust, or just will listen. So here you are. I think some of the best therapy is stranger therapy, which is a lot of what happens at my workshops. People who don't know you, you can like really just expose yourself to, as opposed to those in your close circle who you feel may judge you. So I think a lot of time it's a very it's a cry for help in itself, because you're like, whoa, I'm a stranger. You definitely gave me a lot of information. But at the same time, you don't have to know the person to reach back. And I think sometimes, in his case, it's very good. Like, he got the response. People were like, no, we love you. Like, of course we care about you. And it probably surprised them, because oftentimes folks who are the most vulnerable to these type of feelings, you never know. Right. It's like they're the happy people. They're the people that seem to have it together, and oftentimes camouflage it the best. And I think sometimes, like you're saying, creating the forums, creating the opportunity for men to get it off their chest, or for women to get it off their chest, is, I think, very, productive, because a lot of times they don't feel yet, they ready for therapy. But it might be time, sis. It might be time, my brother. Sign up. Go ahead and make the call. Real Talk with Melissa Berrien. Welcome. Wow, good point. The pressure is real for sure. Trish for real in the house. Welcome. We'll be doing an interview soon. She said, yeah, that's real. That's absolutely real. And thank you again, Melissa. She says, yes, it happens. And afterwards, you're like, did they not ask? They did not ask me all of that. Yes. If it's you giving them, I get it. If it's you telling them, you like, dang, I done told my whole business, my whole life story to this poor lady on the bus stop. But no, it happens. And sometimes those are a plane ride. I'm good for that on a plane ride, listening to someone's story on a plane ride. I'm like, dang, I got your whole life story, and I probably will never see you again. But if it helped you, sis, way to go. But, these moments are just indicative of how not only Kodak, but a lot of us do carry all this pressure. There is a added COVID-19 pressure, but I think in general, with the, I spy social media ness of our lives and people's highlight reels, making us think that it is their reality. I think it can be very heavy to feel as if you're not making it fast enough, you're not making it far enough, you're not making it to the level that other people are making it. And it makes you feel, insecure. It makes you feel, a sense of failure, and not keeping up with the Joneses is, I think, part of what causes so much anxiety among us. Speaking of anxiety, I'm just going to drop a couple of statistics. I saw major depressive disorder in the United States has gone up since the pandemic. This is the global impact of COVID-19, 27%, meaning 53 million additional people have had major depression since the beginning of COVID-19. Okay, 53 million additional. Anxiety disorder, we talked about that a little bit last time, has gone up 25%. That means estimated additional cases of anxiety is 76 million people. 76 million more. Right? So the country has what, 330, 340 million. So 100 million of us have had bouts of depression and anxiety during this pandemic. So if it's happening to you, my brother, my sister, you're not alone. How about you, Tony? Have you seen this in your practice? Have you seen some of this come up more often, or what are you seeing nowadays in your practice?
Of course. I mean, that, and keep in mind, prior to 2020, we were already generalized anxiety disorder, and the spectrum of anxiety disorders were already at around 19% of adults in America in their lifetime would experience diagnosable anxiety. Depression was lower, but I think that's really underdiagnosed personally. But yes, people are struggling. I mean, I think it's on some level it's stabilizing right now, because I think the world is getting a little more predictable around COVID and the pandemic. But yes, people, their financial insecurity, professional insecurity, I think the impact of the weight of all the responsibility families have had over the past year with homeschooling and trying to balance work and school and their health and the isolation and the loss of their routine and the loss of things like, our outlets, like our gyms and our art studios and our dance studios and our groups, and, sitting and having a conversation over a Bible study or something like that. And we lost so much of that over the past year that it has an accumulative effect. I'm actually kind of watching the data that's coming out right now, because There's some camps that are saying that this is, we're going to start turning the tide. And there's some researchers that are saying we're only beginning to see the global impact on the mental health, on community mental health of the pandemic, and that the next 2 to 3 years are probably going to be even worse. And so I think people are experiencing it more for all the reasons above, and many, many, many that I didn't name. But there are also, I think, the constructive part of this, and the part I'm hopeful about, is we're seeing a lot more people being willing to reach out for help. That stigma is actively being broken. That it is no longer, and you used the right word earlier, it is no longer taboo to say I'm in therapy. I'm going to a psychiatrist because I realize I have this issue that is actually my body. It's my brain. It's my central nervous system. I was probably born with it, or because of my life experience, this is the way my body works, and it's okay for me to take this. And we're starting to, because the fact that we're being more open about it, and we're seeing people that we respect and admire that are being open about it, on some level, it's giving us more permission. And the more, I think, for me, and it's not to bring in psyche about this, but what we talked about last Monday is one of our missions was to say, like, we just want to start conversations in homes. It's great if I have a huge platform, if we have a huge platform, but I want to get a mom talking to her daughter. I want to get dad talking to his son. I want to get siblings talking to each other about, like, you didn't know it, but I was going through this. Or I'm going through it now, and I trust that we can talk about it and be open, because that's ultimately what breaks it, community by community, household by household. And the more we do that, the more it takes away that sense of shame about, this is what I'm going through. Because, and we use that word normalize a lot, but that's ultimately what it's doing, is normalizing for us to go through these waves, especially if we have an underlying diagnosis, an underlying issue, because ultimately this mental health issues are an intersection of biology and sociology. They are how we're born, what we're genetically predisposed for, how our brain works, how our body chemistry works, and then the stuff that we go through in life and what we're exposed to, the stressors, the family systems, the environments, the community, and how those things intertwine. And actually, DBT, it's called the biosocial model. And the idea of nature versus nurture is not true. It's nature and nurture always, and how are they interplaying? That looks like whether we have a more balanced mental health, or it's something we have to work much harder at to keep regulated and keep balanced. Can hear you. Yeah.
Kept me, I was just digesting, sorry. Something just came to my mind. Thank y'all. Drop a comment. Let us know. The stranger danger is low for me. Every stranger talks to me. Are you one of those people? Listen, I don't even be asking for people to come up to me. I don't know. I think I have a friendly face. That's what my mom used to say. You have a friendly face.
I actually think you missed the call. I heard your last few videos. You might have missed your calling as a mental health professional.
I know.
Yeah, you have deep insights for real. Without
indirectly, I ain't got no license, but indirectly, I feel like I've been doing mental health my whole life, because literally, and I thank you, real talk, with Melissa Berry, and she's like, haha, yes, this is our honestly, everyone has a story to tell when it comes to mental health, because I was just thinking as you were speaking, about my own family structure. And I'm gonna get into y'all business a little bit, if you don't mind. Think about, and let's not say, and hold on, Melissa says, my mom says I collect people and stories. It's a blessing. Amen. I'm gonna take it as a blessing. I'm telling you, I've never met a stranger. But they say, like, the elevator 2 floors, I've already made friends. I'm like, okay, great. Now I know everything about you. I'll see you guys soon. Never again. I mean, but when I think about what you just said, nature and nurture, I think many of us, particularly in households of color, have seen mental health struggles in action. Ooh, I said it. I'm coming down your blocks. Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes we are taught, remember, we are a very closed culture when it comes to domestic affairs. You're not supposed to talk about what go on in your house. You're not supposed to tell nobody. I don't know about you guys. When I was little, it was drilled into me, whooped into me. You don't go to school and tell the teacher what mommy said or what mommy did. So oftentimes we are very protective of our home base and our home turf within our households. So, but if we're real about it, there are many people that experience parents, loved ones, siblings, uncle them, grandma, auntie, fill in the blank, that have shown signs of, mental health challenges. Would you agree? Y'all put it in a comment. Don't let me know if I'm by myself, because we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to admit it. We are not, a culture where we're going to go and, say to everybody, my mama act a little crazy every now and then. And I say crazy with love, air quote crazy, not saying that someone is, beyond reproach or something like this. I want to say that, that's the terminology, that's the colloquialism that we use. I don't mean it in any type of disrespect. Right. But I know for a fact, even just talking to, like I say, strangers, to family and to friends, the way people behave with, even in our households, most of us have had some kind of interaction with someone who is in need of mental health support. And if we are not, conditioned to see that as something that we can help address, not even sometimes within ourselves, because sometimes you end up getting the brunt of, the anger or the feelings of resentment or whatever their mental health struggle is. We have to start to talk about it more, though, so that they do get appropriate help. Like I said, we be trying to pray it away. We might tell the minister. We might even tell the ministry group, a couple of people we can trust. But y'all know y'all don't like to talk about your business in a way that, can make a mental health intervention, successful. So I'm glad in this scenario that Kodak said it out loud. That mother heard, sister heard, brother heard, all his peoples heard. Because all this, obviously, and I'm not assuming, I don't want to assume because I don't know him and I don't know the particulars of the situation. But for the most part, there's oftentimes, certain signals or certain curious behavior that even within a family we protect. We don't want to call it out. We don't want to address it. Like, I know folk I believe to be bipolar in my family. They're not diagnosed. They're not diagnosed. But I keep thinking, bruh, in another lifetime, or if we were another culture, you would have been got medicine and put back on the right track, and stop living this kind of, just a volatile existence where you making yourself mad, you making everybody else mad, you making your household uncomfortable. Everybody is now living on the edge and trying not to piss you off. Like, I've seen this and I'm just like, golly, it's hard to address, particularly when it's the man of the household. But it oftentimes is not just him or her. It can be the wife or whoever else in the household. And I do believe some of us are missing, an opportunity to address or maybe even help lead the ones we love the most to help. Now, obviously, they're not all going to take it. They are going to, like, especially if they're older, especially if they're your parents or whoever, grandma, them, they're not trying to hear all that. But if we can, we have to be more open about this, folks, because I think, we are suffering in silence. Not only the person that's suffering from the mental health, challenge, but the people who have to live with them are also suffering in silence, because everybody has learned to cope or pacify or just kind of like ignore until it like hurts a lot and you cry about it and then you ignore it again. But we have this kind of like, oh my gosh, I hear you. Yes, Trish, you see what I'm saying? Yes, she's talking about, yes, swept under the rug of Jesus will fix it. Yes, it is. That's a good way to put it, my sister. Yes. When they need to go in and sit with a therapist. Amen to that. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Blind guy, his wife says, kudos to you on the straight people you collect. Amen. We all have them. And they add, true Suzette holds an honorary mental health certificate. Hello. Sometimes I feel like it. And yes, she says it's crazy, but it's fun. I feel the same way. But yeah, when it comes to us and secrecy within, our Black and brown families and how much we protect those who have these deep struggles, whether it's the alcoholism, whether, like I say, it's a grown people with temper tantrums. Have you seen this? Grown
Yeah.
people going off on what husbands and wives, mothers embarrassing children. Y'all ain't seen it in a Walmart. Mom cutting up and making their child feel so small and so little. They got to live with somebody that sees this. And why do you think, Tony, we hide it so much, or we cover for it, and we almost suffer through it, as opposed to helping address it when appropriate, I guess? Put it in, with a question mark. Is it appropriate to address this? But again, I don't know. Culturally, we just have such a deep, protective, reflex. We got to protect our own. But we got to also address some of the issues before they become generational. So talk about what you've seen and why we do that.
I think there's a few layers to that. I actually think it starts from a protective, but with a good intention. And I mean, because for so long, our communities have had to protect against outside. And that if we showed vulnerability, that we were taken advantage of, we were hurt, we were further marginalized, we were further oppressed. And so protecting someone who maybe is showing struggles with addiction or depression or anxiety or bipolar, that initially, I think generationally, it started as a way of, well, we have to protect them. We have to keep them in close to us because we can't trust whether it's the medical community or a psychiatric community or a hospital system to actually do right by them. And what I think that has happened over generations is that what started out of necessity has grown into shame and judgment, because there are systems that, while again, I think there's an extensive amount of systemic racism and systemic prejudice, and there's a whole movement that in many ways I support of decolonizing therapy, that most research done is only done on Caucasian European American candidates. Most medications are tested on Caucasian European American candidates and recipients. So there is a deficit of deeper understanding of our community's mental health. But so the initial point I was making was that it started as protective. It grew into shame. And then I think what happens now is there's such a pervasive lack of understanding that we willfully ignore because I don't know how to help. So I'm going to minimize what I see, because if I look at it, I don't know what to do with it. If I acknowledge this person is struggling that I love, but I don't know who to refer them to, I don't know how to navigate a psychiatric office. I know very little about medications and whether or not I can trust this doctor of what they're putting them on. Then it's like, well, I'm going to go with what's familiar. I'm going to go to the church. I'm going to go to the Bible. I'm going to go to just let's, or to the point we were making earlier, like if they smoking and that's helping them relax, so be it. I'm going to so it became, I think, something that, and it is, don't shame, or I try to find a lot of compassion for family members and their uncertainty of how to help. It's not that I don't want to, it's I don't know how to help. And that's why conversations like these are so important, because it hopefully gives a little guidance that it's okay. Let's start with the resources that are available. Let's start with the forums that are out there. Let's start with listening to better educate how to recognize somebody that might be at risk for taking their own life. What does it look like when my loved one is struggling with depression? What's the difference between worrying and an actual anxiety disorder? And so the more we can understand that and be open to that and know that it exists within our families. I think about when I first, if I can share a quick story real quick, because a lot of people know me that I've mentored, have heard this story before. But when I decided, I actually started college as an architecture major. Couldn't do the math. It got too overwhelming. And so I switched, and I found, just by chance, this path in life that I hopefully have a gift for and decent at, and I enjoy very much doing. But I had absolutely no reference point. When I started into my undergraduate classes, my psychology classes, my sociology classes, and I was doing an internship where I was actually going out to houses of kids, And actually working with a lot of, in Lawrence, Kansas, there's actually a pretty big Native American population because there's a big university there called Haskell University. And I was working a lot with young men and women from a Native American population. And I had absolutely no idea of what a therapist is supposed to do, what they're supposed to say, how they're supposed to act. And around that time, the movie Good Will Hunting came out. And I completely modeled my style after Robin Williams' character in Good Will Hunting. And it's not because I immensely relate to that, but it's like I didn't know where else to look because I didn't know anybody in therapy. I didn't know any therapists. I didn't know anybody that had been to therapy. I didn't even really know what this process was supposed to look like. And so, thankfully I've gotten, 20 plus years under my belt, and I try to do what I best can to guide people on navigating the process. But I feel deeply for people who see these problems and then have no idea what to do. And I think to speak to your point, I think that becomes one of the biggest barriers, is where do I turn next? Who do I trust? I think there's a big layer of, there's judgment in our communities.
Lots.
Person that they got issues, they just need their nerve pills. To your point, they're kind of crazy, that it's like, and we brush that off, just hoping it doesn't get worse. Until it does get to the point where we have to address it. And then by that point, we've lost so much time, and things can, particularly things like trauma and anxiety, is the longer they go, the harder they are to resolve. And so I think this comes down to better educating ourselves and our family systems on how to recognize it, because if we can intervene early, if we can intervene when that person has their first break at 21, 22, it makes a huge difference. If we can intervene when they first start struggling with substances at 17, 18, 19, it makes a difference before they lose decades of life to these things.
Absolutely. I think there's so much that you just said that was so good. Shame for what we don't understand. Shame. Boy, we good at using that, boy. Communities of color will make you feel like you ain't nothing and make you feel so ashamed of being, whatever it is. So we started from, and I agree with you, protection to like hiding, because we don't know where to go oftentimes. And I agree with TJ adding, yes, I think it's deep seated by our older generation because they couldn't trust the medical community. They found ways to keep going. Yes. So their whole example was like, pray about it, give it on to Jesus and keep it moving. There was really not much more to it than that. And if you can't cope by using that method, like you have no other alternative. You was like, I'm really messed up. Or for me, I felt like God wasn't listening. I was like, well, wait a minute. Am I saying my prayers right? Do I need to throw, some salt over my shoulder, bend on that knee, get in this east direction, +1, carry the 2? Like, I felt like there was something wrong with how I even approached God. Is he hearing my prayer? And I think a lot of people get disillusioned with particularly religion when they feel like, okay, God's not answering me. I still have suicidal ideation. I still, have same-sex attraction. I still have, can I keep going? I still have, a painful marriage. And they think, I haven't, I don't know. I'm not as spiritual as I think I am. I haven't crossed over into deserving, God's goodness. But I do believe, there's an awakening happening where people are now saying, yes, Jesus and therapy, Jesus and whatever help it is that you need. And that he, whatever your belief system provides people, resources, and other human beings to help guide you and get that burden from off of you. But I agree with you. Thanks, TJ, that, yeah, we were very much conditioned in a way that was, protect first, ignore if you can, and then do what you know how to do, which is trust the Lord. That's about it. And then, it can get worse, and it can get, I've seen families hide so much in our communities. Boy, we be hiding some destructive and just, behavior that just does not serve us well. And instead of, facing it head on, with all the church rumors and all the mouths at work and all the family and friends, well, they got a daughter that, you know how we do. You know how we do. instead of dealing with it, we end up, camouflage that doesn't really last, because oftentimes when they say the darkness shall come to light, so one way or another it's going to get handled. And as Tony said, it just depends on how long the trauma stays with us, and you know then how much what should I say, residual effect it will leave, because it's been let loose in our lives to keep going and keep injuring and re-injuring. I saw a quote today on Instagram that says something to the effect of when you're hurt and you don't get healed, you bleed on the people that never cut you.
Oof.
And I thought, ooh, Jesus, this is a real quote, because we are running around with unhealed wounds, and we're running around bleeding all over people that had nothing to do with that original trauma. And we are, projecting it on our husbands, projecting it on our kids, projecting it on everybody else, but, not really coming to terms with, accepting, and learning how it's a gradual process to heal what it is that put that hole in your heart in the first place. So it's a good thing that we are exposing some of this. Blind guy, his wife, their life says intangible resources aren't the way to go. Jesus is cool, but we need Tony, Suzette, and others. Amen, sis. But Jesus get you to step one, but
Yeah.
you got to add something to that. You got to definitely, I hear you. It's not just wishing it away. You hear what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to sound like that because I'm a woman of faith as well. But what would you add, Tony?
There's a couple of things that come to mind. One is, I think those things aren't separate. They're not mutually exclusive. The idea psychology is rooted in two words, psyche and ology. Ology is Latin and is for the study of. Psyche actually translates to the soul. And so if we're talking about psychology,
I know that.
about the study of the soul. And that means, what does it mean to be us? What does it mean to be human? And I don't think, and every culture around the world has some deeper spiritual belief. And whether you name that as a god, whether you have a connection to the nature spirits, if you what it's I think it's innate in us to seek a higher connection. Carl Jung talked about the cosmic consciousness, that we are all connected. If you get into physics, reality is, if you believe in the Big Bang, then you believe every single one of us has shared atoms that were all one at one point. So to me, not to get too deeply philosophical here, but to me, those things aren't separate. If spirituality and connection to some higher power can be, it says, essentially, we're just looking at, how are we connected? How do we find the deeper connections? How are we taught to treat each other? And where do we get that from? And I think when we really boil it down, is most spiritual teachings, no matter how you name God, say, be kind to one another. Try to understand one another. Don't judge one another. Be accountable. Be patient with one another. Be slow to anger. And I guess where that links to me is what we're talking about is, if we're less likely to be ashamed, we're more likely to be open if we can reasonably anticipate people will receive what we have to say without judgment. We're more likely to open our wounds, in a sense, and be open about what we're struggling with, if they're not going to say, man, what's wrong with you? Or you're weak. Wow, you need to get over that S, you know what I mean? I was about to cuss, I'm sorry. And so it's.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Hey, we gonna keep it real. We gonna keep it too real.
Right. But, and I think, and to me, it's like, I think about my own family's journey. I don't identify with any particular religious belief system right now, but I was raised devoutly Catholic. And then there's a lot of reasons we could talk about another day. Why?
Another show.
Yeah, for me, it's just a lot of my questions couldn't be answered. And so I went on a little bit of a different journey. And so, but I know for my mom, the struggles that she has had in life, she's overcome them with her faith, primarily. And so, and I think I think in DBT, we talk about doing what works. And if your faith is the thing that helps you get through it, great. If you have all the faith in the world and are still struggling, then there's a lot of other resources that can complement that. And so I don't think those things need to be disconnected.
Or
I think
mutually exclusive. Yeah.
listen, prayer and meditation actually are, they're the thing now. Breathe, meditate, do these things, because we're starting to understand more of what happens in the brain and body when we do those things regularly. Well, okay, great. I don't care who you pray to. Do it.
Yeah. I love this comment. No, I'm hearing you, because now it's scientific. Prayer and meditation helps through brain waves, and we've been doing that. Or did we stop? I think that's a part of like my journey. Like I had stopped for a little while, so I'm back on it. But a lot of the disconnect we feel. I hear what you're saying. I think Blind Guy, his wife, are adding that. I'm not discounting Jesus or any other spirituality. Just saying, it's better. That it's better the resources that are available. I agree with you. They use all the resources available. Same thing you're saying. Add it with. It's not either or, and it's not instead of. There was a party, but Jesus made it better by bringing the wine. Y'all funny. Y'all something else. Yes. So add a little something. Add a little spice, paprika, wine, whatever you need to add. But it's like we're saying is not, don't just, if you're feeling that the whole is still there, you pray, you fast, and it's still heavy. There are other resources that are available that can help lighten that burden in Jesus' name. You feel me? So that's why I think people are not always aware of. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, and even for people that may be listening or hear this down the line that don't have that faith or don't have a sense of connection, that the human connection. I think ultimately that's, my grew up, I went to CCD class, First Communion, it was Eucharistic minister in the college, all these things. And ultimately it's like my interpretation of a lot of scripture is like, how are you connecting with one another? Are you seeking connection, real human, genuine connection, whether that's through faith, whether that's through culture, whether that's through shared experience, whatever it is if we deeply seek connection. There's studies that show the primary root of addiction is emotional loneliness. When we feel connected, we're less likely to turn to numbing ourselves. Depression, in many ways, is rooted in a sense of loneliness and isolation. I don't feel connected to anyone. And I think coming back to the top of our conversation, when people feel these thoughts about not wanting to be alive, it's because they feel disconnected. They don't feel important. They don't feel like their life matters, and they don't feel like it can be better. And so the more we can find avenues and ways to really genuinely, deeply connect on a personal, human, spiritual level, the better our mental health is. And that requires us to maybe go through some difficult stuff to see what are our barriers to connecting. Maybe it's because I'm hurt. Maybe it's because I feel abandoned. Maybe it's because I'm carrying these traumas that I don't trust people, or I feel like people are going to hurt me, or people are going to let me down. So I hold up these barriers, these walls, these shields that keep me from connecting. And until we actually go through those and take those down brick by brick and come to understand why I put them up in the first place, and allow ourselves to validate that I wasn't just shutting myself off from the world. These things had a function at one point in my life. I built this wall to feel safe because at one point in my life, I didn't feel safe. I built this wall so I could actually feel a sense of security because the world felt so chaotic for so long. But when we can come to understand that better, then we feel more capable and competent in taking those bricks down and allowing ourselves to really connect.
That's real. That's real.
Earlier about a men's conference is we hold these bricks up. We carry these damn bags of bricks around because we think that's what we're supposed to do, because that's what we've been told to do our entire life.
And my daddy need to go to a men's conference, and I don't think he'll ever go.
Mine too. Me and my dad.
I'm like, bro, you carrying a lot, bro. You're carrying a lot. Yeah. I would give anything to see that you were enlightened, and that your burden is lightened. You know what I mean? There's so many people. It could be anybody that we know in our lives that we feel like, oh my gosh, if they only knew there is another way of living. Life is not to be endured. And I think a lot of people live like that at every stage. Like I said, there can be seasons where you have to have endurance, for sure. I have a set of cousins right now. They father passed, brother passed. Father passed April, brother passed June, sister just passed last week. Their season is a very, tough endurance season. But there are other parts of our lives that we can heal, that, can come, 30 years ago, and you're not supposed to, feel that way about them still, but you do. You don't feel someone is proud of you. You don't feel somebody loves you. You don't feel you've gotten, to where you should get. There's so many things that bother us
Yeah.
if we really spent time in prayer, in meditation, and with the help of professionals to, figure it out. But that's what's most important. I'm going to let you go in a few minutes. It's dinner time, bro.
No,
I
can I make a
I was
comment just to that point?
Yes, go ahead.
Even Jesus needed assistance bearing the cross.
That's a word.
And so, like,
That's a word.
when we realize we try to convince ourselves that I'm doing myself a favor, I'm showing my strength by trying to carry these things on my own. I don't think that's the model. I think we had to survive for so long because, again, our communities couldn't rely on outside world for so long. And I hope part of this transformation that I am encouraged by, particularly in the mental health, with our mental health, is that it is absolutely okay to say, I need some help with this. This is getting a little too heavy for me right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm looking at the statistics, and we're going to wrap up here shortly, but we're looking at statistics. 47,500 people as of 2019 took their own lives in the United States. It is the 10th leading cause of death of adults. If you're between the ages, I think, is 10 and 34, it's the second leading cause of death for adults. And it is, you're more likely to find someone has taken their own life, 2.5 times more likely than to suffer from suicide, from homicide.
Mm-hmm.
So someone taking their own life is 2.5 times more likely to happen than someone dying at the hands of someone else. I hope I was clear on that. So we worry about homicide. We read about homicide all the time in the news. Oh my gosh, who kills who, whatever. But it is much more frequent than someone takes their own life. And on a final note, I guess I want to leave on something more positive. But with Kodak now saying, he was just playing. He really is okay now. Men gotta say what they gotta say, especially public figures. What are your thoughts when it comes to lessening that? What are your thoughts when it comes to especially in families of color? I don't think we're allowed to even talk about it. We just say God don't like it.
Yeah.
And we don't even really go there with it much times. How do we bridge the conversation, particularly with young people? There are much more of my younger cousins that I'm afraid might have some issues that I'm just like, y'all got, she needs counseling. She needs this, she needs that. What do you say about that?
Bridging the gap is first listening. What's the actual issue somebody's struggling with? Because I think when I think that's the biggest barrier, because I get a lot of people that I work with, and the team that I work with, we get people that are first time into therapy, that 21, 22-year-old Black woman, Hispanic man that are saying, you know what, I'm struggling and I need help. And I think, so I think the first thing we can do as family members is just genuinely listen. We care so much for people that we automatically want to go into problem solving. We automatically want to go into explaining it. Oh, this is why, this is what you can do to fix it. And I think the most effective thing we can do as a loved one is just listen. Just hear them out for what they're struggling with. And then say, okay, how can I help? If there's a direction we could put, maybe we sit down and we go through the Psychology Today profile, or we go through therapy for Black girls for profiles to find, or good therapy profiles to find somebody. But the first thing we can do is listen. I think for him, that reversal of course, I hope he's telling the truth on some level, that he was playing. I saw an interview that he did that was recorded, and it didn't make me think he was playing. And so before that I think there's a image issue here that I think we all even struggle with, is what are people going to think about us if this is really where I'm at? If I'm struggling with depression, I'm struggling with thoughts of taking my own life, how are people going to see me? It is I would say almost the number one question that I get. It's in the top two of, Is my employer ever going to see my medical records? Is anybody going to know what you put in your notes about what we talk about in session? Because they're so afraid of what other people will think. And I think so. This is an image issue that I have to keep it all together, particularly for us. We already know we have to work harder than everybody else. We already have to know we have to make to work twice as hard to get half as far. And so this issue of what it means for us as communities and a society, and as what does it mean to have this struggle? And I think so. Just listening without judgment, to our point earlier, educating on what it looks like. So we, even if somebody doesn't tell us, we're more willing to feel capable of opening the conversation. If you have a child or a spouse and maybe they're drinking a little too much, or they're sleeping a lot more than they have been, or you're noticing cuts on somebody's arm or something like that, and it's like, let's not ignore what we know instinctually when something is wrong.
Yep.
And so that's, I don't know what his reversal course was about, but I hope it's that it was genuine. If not, I hope he's getting the help he needs, because ultimately that's what we all need when we're struggling, is just somebody to say, I hear you, and let's work through this together.
I love it. I hope you guys are encouraged. I wanted to bring to light more than anything the fact that there's something that we can do about this within our communities, both individually and collectively. There are ways, as Tony is just basically saying, listen, speak up, offer resources, don't ignore, don't sweep under the Jesus rug, as it was said earlier. I think I'm gonna use that, Trish, for real. And just be open minded. The judgment is the scariest part. I know for when we do events, women's events, they are shocked that, like, when I have judges on the panel or whoever, and they're talking about their struggles with motherhood or struggles with anxiety or struggles with whatever, and they're like, these women struggle. Like, if we all said out loud what we're struggling with, you'll be surprised how many people actually identify and have had those, whether now or in another season, have said to themselves, oh my God, I'm going to give up. I'm a parent. I have so many, things on my plate. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good mother. I'm not a mother yet. I have this anxiety. I have that. Trust me, we're not alone, even though it feels like it. The isolation in a world where we're more connected than ever is so ironic. I don't even know what to say, but it's real out here. If you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling as if you don't have anybody, no one cares about you. A, that's not true, but B, reach out. Reach out. As Tony said, this isolation out here is real. COVID has made us even more isolated. So if you had that kind of feeling already, or if it's brand new to you, lost your job, sitting at home, you wondering, whoa, does anybody really care I exist? It'd be easier to get rid of this pain. Let's try to find a different solution. I promise you there are people that care about you and want to see you healthy and happy. So definitely, if that's you, I'm gonna leave the suicide prevention line in our discussion here. If you need to see a therapist, if you happen to be in South Florida, it's a good one right here. If you need me to put a couple dollars on your Cash App so you can go see him, let's go. It costs a little bit, but it's worth every penny.
Hey, use your insurance. For people that have insurances, use it.
Yeah, insurance covers some people, but some people are out of network. So you got to make sure you take care of yourselves, guys. But that's what this show was really designed for, encouraging you and the people that you are in contact with, you to be that, as we talked about on Saturday, that battery, that you might be more charged up than they are right now. Your season might be a season where you can, pull for them, energize them, speak up for them when you're seeing these things. And let's stop hiding it. Let's stop camouflaging. Let's stop keeping it indoors, in house, and you don't talk about it till the person, do something totally out of character, and now everybody knows anyway. So let's try to be more proactive and preventative when it comes to, what we need as individuals. Go take that walk, go start, exercise, or, whatever it is. You know what you need, or maybe you don't. Maybe you need help to figure out what you need to get balance. I know what I need now to get back in balance, but it can happen to any of us. As Tony said, mental health is that spectrum, and it's not always going to be high. But when we feel it going low, we have to correct. We have to be active in our own rebalancing. So I hope you've enjoyed. Tony, you have any last words before we sign off?
No, I just thank you for the conversation. This is what needs to happen more and more often on every platform available. And I know there's a lot of really good people that are out there that are bringing light to it and doing partnerships. And there's a lot of not-for-profits and clinicians and people that are speaking truth more openly. And just the more we do that, the more people will feel empowered and capable of getting the help when they need it.
That's what we want. Absolutely. Well, saying good night and good day to all of you. If you're watching the replay, still drop a comment. We'll come back and we'll still read. I didn't invite anybody up, but guess what? I'm going to try that next time. So get ready to be a panelist, you guys. I want to hear from you. Again, we do this for you, and I want to thank all my subscribers. Thank you to those who are just joining the squad, as I call it, the Suzette Speaks community. If you see these shows, please go ahead and like. I know we did better than them few likes we got now, so go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe, most importantly, so more people will be able to see this message. But it's been a pleasure as always, and I'll see you next month. Mr. Gonzalez, always a pleasure to have these deep conversations with you. Blind Guy, his wife, their life says, thank you so much. This was wonderful. We appreciate you. Thank you guys so very much for being a part of the conversation. All right. So we'll see you guys very soon. Take care. And I appreciate you watching. All the best. All right, guys. Good night. Bye-bye.